Blueprints is one of the best games of 2025. This indie game was universally praised for its addictive mix of puzzles and roguelite mechanics, with critics comparing it to all-time classics like Outer Wilds and Return of the Obra Dinn. But there are many people who don't agree with Blueprints' critical acclaim. At launch, over 20% of its Steam reviews were negative, and pretty much every negative review revolves around one thing: the randomness. These players started Blueprints with the expectation of getting a traditional puzzle game, but that's not what they got. Blueprints isn't a puzzle game when you start playing, and it doesn't become one until you beat it. Let me explain. Puzzle games are one of the most popular genres of video games. From a AAA blockbuster like Portal 2 to an ultra-casual smash hit like Angry Birds, most gamers have played a puzzle game at least once in their lives. Even games in other genres often feature puzzles to break up the pacing. In the survival horror game Resident Evil 4, you can't save Ashley unless you hack your way through these electronic locks. The turn-based RPG Baldur's Gate 3 has you play chess to prove your heroism. And a non-negligible part of the hack-and-slash series God of War is spent rotating levers and kicking around statues. These puzzles all function the same way. They are presented as a roadblock for the player. You can't get to the reward unless you solve the puzzle. This concept is the foundation for pretty much every puzzle game. In Portal, you can't enter Test Chamber 2 before you solve Test Chamber 1. In Baba Is You can sometimes attempt different levels at once, but you still need to complete one area before you can move on to the next one. Even open-world puzzle games work this way. After a short tutorial, almost every puzzle in the Witness becomes available at once, so if you get stuck, you can just try a different type of puzzle. But more difficult puzzles are locked behind easier ones of the same type, and you still have to beat the sequence of every puzzle type to access the final section of the game. Return of the Obra Dinn is even more open-ended. Your task is to figure out the identities and causes of death of the crew of a ship. You can finish the game by simply guessing every solution, but the true ending and final chapter are locked until you've correctly solved the fate of every single crew member. And in Outer Wilds, the entire solar system is accessible from the very start. You're only limited by your knowledge of the game. But even here, reaching the true ending still requires you to solve Outer Wilds' many mysteries. In short, to beat a puzzle game, you need to solve its puzzles. Seems logical, right? Well, Blueprints developer Tonda Ross calls these roadblocks one of the genre's biggest flaws. In a more traditional puzzle game, if a player has trouble with a particular puzzle, they will often find themselves stuck until they can solve it. It's a binary check, and if you can't figure it out, you're going to be forced to either look up the answer or give up on the game. Blueprints doesn't work this way. You don't need to solve any of its puzzles to see the credits roll. Before I continue, a quick spoiler warning. I won't reveal any puzzle solutions for Blueprints, but I will discuss the game's general design and gameplay mechanics. So if you haven't played Blueprints yet and want to experience it without any prior knowledge, I recommend bookmarking this video and coming back once you've completed at least a few in-game days. Alright, so in Blueprints you play as a teenager named Simon. He has inherited Mount Holly, a giant mansion, from his wealthy grandfather, on the condition that he manages to find and enter room 46. That's easier said than done. Not only does no one know how to do so, the layout of the mansion changes every day. You start each day in the south of Mount Holly and have to draft rooms in a way that will let you reach room 46. You need to take into account each room's effects, the amount of doorways and their directions. So Blueprints gives you one clear objective: reach room 46. It's up to you to figure out the rest. Because it's branded as a puzzle game, most people will assume you need to solve its puzzles to do so. That's not surprising, because every room in the game contains some kind of puzzle or mystery. There are safes to unlock, photos to investigate, terminals to hack, and so on. But that assumption is misguided. Unlike more traditional puzzle games, Blueprints' Roadblocks aren't the puzzles themselves. In fact, reaching room 46 is pretty straightforward once you figure out what to do. However, knowing what to do and being able to do it are two very different things. This is where a lot of the frustration with Blueprints comes from. Players quickly discover that RNG is the true roadblock on the way to room 46, because Blueprints is a roguelite at heart, and it demands to be played like one. So, roguelites are the more forgiving variant of roguelikes. In a roguelike, you lose all your progress when you die. But roguelites are designed with a form of permanent progression in mind that will help you get further and further into the game. The first time you play Hades, for example, you probably won't make it out of Tartarus, the first area of the game. But dying doesn't feel too bad, because you keep some of the things you've collected during your run, and you can trade those for permanent upgrades, such as an extra life or a better weapon that will make future runs easier.
Grant me the aspect of Hestia.
However, it's possible to beat Hades without any permanent upgrades. This depends on your skill level and knowledge of the game's mechanics. Blueprints works in a similar way. In order to reach room 46, you need to balance several types of currencies. Gems to draft better rooms, keys to open locked doors, coins to purchase powerful items, and steps. Every time you enter a new room, you lose one step. When your steps run out, you pass out, ending your run. That means you lose any collected resources and items you may have found along the way. But Blueprints also has loads of permanent upgrades to help you on your journey to room 46. This is where the puzzles come in. Completing some of these will reward you with a buff in future runs. An increased step count, for example, will give you more breathing room to explore the mansion, and a larger allowance will make it easier to buy important items you previously couldn't afford. Rooms can also be upgraded for improved rewards, and there might even be powerful new rooms hidden somewhere in Mount Holly. Other permanent unlocks are knowledge-based. For example, a note in one room might make you realize how to open a safe, which might contain a helpful reward. So now that you've figured out the safe combination, drafting that particular room has become a better option than before. Not every puzzle will reward you with a gameplay advantage, by the way. There are many puzzles in the game that only lead to other, more complex puzzles, or simply exist to expand on the game's lore. While solving these puzzles will certainly make the road to room 46 easier, understanding the game's underlying mechanics will outweigh any bonuses a puzzle might give you. The real skill in Blueprints comes from managing your resources, drafting the right rooms in the right spots, and realizing when your run is dead in the water. Because you can't just think about your current run. You also have to keep future runs in mind, and sometimes losing is the best way to make progress. Learning when to sacrifice a run is essential to succeed in Blueprints. The game offers tons of ways to benefit your future self. The sauna, for example, is a dead end, but drafting it gives you more steps the next day, and the code check lets you donate an item to retrieve in future runs. The freezer perhaps exemplifies this concept the most. It's not only a dead end, it also freezes your gems and coins, which means you can't buy any items or draft the best rooms anymore. The upside is that your frozen resources carry over to the next day, so you'll start your next run with a massive advantage. But sacrificing runs is also important to gain information. If a rare room you've never seen before suddenly pops up, but drafting it means you lose your current run, it often makes sense to choose it anyway. The knowledge you gather for future runs will probably outweigh the temporary bonus of drafting a room with many doors that you've seen a dozen times before. Learning and getting good at the game's mechanics, knowing which rooms can spawn where, when it's worth spending steps to backtrack to a previous room, which items to buy and how they interact with the mansion, is way more important to reach room 46 than figuring out the puzzles themselves. But due to their past experiences, puzzle game fans tend to assume they need to solve puzzles to beat Blueprints. They'll discover a puzzle, work out its solution, and then spend hours trying to brute force the RNG just so they can solve that particular puzzle. This is probably the worst way to play Blueprints. One early example of a puzzle that comes up time and time again as a source of frustration is the Boiler Room Laboratory combo. In the corner of Mount Holly's lab stands a strange machine with 10 numbered levers. However, you can't actually interact with the machine. A note next to it explains why. In order to even attempt solving this puzzle, you also need to draft the Boiler Room. This room won't show up every run, because it's classified as unusual, the second rarest room tier in the game. And once you manage to draft it, you still need to route power to the laboratory. So you can imagine many puzzle game veterans assuming this puzzle is a roadblock, preventing them from reaching room 46. So they spent the next runs unsuccessfully trying to set up the combo. Some runs they're able to draft the Boiler Room, but not the laboratory. Other runs they get the laboratory, but not the Boiler Room. Some days they don't even come across either room, and with every reset their frustration grows. So they either give up and abandon Blueprints, never knowing that this puzzle was completely optional, or persevere until they eventually get lucky, severely impacting their enjoyment of the game in the process. If you try to brute force your way through Blueprints, you will get frustrated. Many players are so focused on the puzzles that they forget that Mount Holly was built on the foundation of a roguelite. You're not meant to fight the RNG, you're supposed to go with the flow. So instead of starting each day with a specific objective in mind, you should wait and see what the day has in store for you. And by taking your time and exploring the game, you'll discover that Blueprints has a lot of ways to mitigate its randomness. You can reroll drafted rooms. You can change the rarity of specific rooms. There are ways to increase the spawn rate of the rarest rooms, and so on. Forget the puzzles. It's this knowledge that will lead you to room 46. Once you do, a cutscene plays, the credits roll, and another day starts. This is the point where Blueprints evolves into a proper puzzle game. So, you've reached room 46. Now what? Well, you've entered Blueprints' second act. The game hands you a list of hints to decipher, guiding you towards Mount Holly's deeper mysteries. Blueprints only becomes a true puzzle game from this point onwards. Many of the puzzles that could previously be skipped are now mandatory. Remember the machine in the laboratory? Well, you'll now have to solve it to make further progress. That doesn't mean its roguelite mechanics take a backseat. Solving these puzzles can be done in any order and will still depend on which rooms you draft. And solving one puzzle will often provide a clue for another, so you can once again go with the flow. Many of the required puzzles also give you some kind of permanent upgrade, which means that the roguelite mechanics become easier and easier to handle over time. It's not just the satisfaction of solving the puzzles that you're getting. You also feel yourself becoming more powerful in the process. The puzzles also get more and more complex. Relying on your memory won't suffice anymore, as there is simply too much information to parse. To get ahead, you need to take extensive notes. And since the game lacks a way to review documents you've already seen before, taking screenshots is pretty much a requirement as well. So ignoring the puzzles is no longer possible. They are now roadblocks that stand in your way. And yet, Blueprints is still doing what Tonda Ross intended, avoiding one of the puzzle genre's biggest flaws. While it now has binary checks, the game provides you with so many objectives at once, you'll never truly feel stuck, because there's always another puzzle to try your hand at. The clues you get after reaching room 46 culminate in a massive puzzle that'll test your knowledge of Blueprints' world, history, and characters. And solving it makes you feel like a genius, something that only the very best puzzle games do. This is Blueprints at its peak. Now, a peak implies that things won't improve from here on out. The same is true in Blueprints. From this point onwards, the game slowly becomes a slog to play. There are a few reasons for this. First, the quality of life issues become more and more grating. You still move at a snail's pace. Every time you pick up an item, it shows the explainer, even though you've used them dozens of times at this point. And the game's animations are as slow as ever. This is a big oversight for a game that you're supposed to replay over and over. Second, Blueprints' unique selling point, its roguelite design, starts working against the player. There's no challenge in navigating Mount Holly anymore, because at this point you're drowning in coins, gems and upgraded rooms. The sense of mystery is also gone. You know every room inside out and there are barely any new ones to discover. But you still need to deal with the game's RNG to solve its puzzles. Not only that, their solutions become more and more obscure, often requiring multiple items on the same day. This means that even if you've figured out what to do, you still need to spend several in-game days setting everything up, just so you can attempt to solve the puzzle. Now, this might seem similar to the complaints in Blueprints' negative reviews, but there is one key difference. Unlike in the early game, at this stage, Blueprints' puzzles are basically a binary check. The game eventually falls into the trap that its developer tried so hard to avoid. At this point, playing the game felt like a chore, like it was actively wasting my time. So after around 60 hours of playtime, I decided to quit, accepting that I'll never fully uncover all the mysteries of Mount Holly. Does that mean Blueprints is a bad game? Not at all. In fact, quitting the game before I had solved every puzzle hasn't made me like it any less. You see, serving the completionist mindset is a major part of traditional puzzle games. Have you really mastered Angry Birds if you haven't gotten 3 stars in every level? Do you really understand the world of Outer Wilds if you haven't collected every entry in your ship log? And have you truly completed Return of the Obra Dinn if you haven't correctly identified every crew member? Well, I believe Blueprints deliberately doesn't work this way. Even if you were to explore Mount Holly for hundreds of hours, you will never get a complete sense of closure. The mansion is filled with red herrings, incomplete storylines, and puzzles that lead to a dead end. These unresolved threads are dividing the Blueprints community. Some say Mount Holly still has more secrets to uncover. Others think a future update will fill in the blanks. I'm in the camp that believes that this is it. I think it's just another example of how Tondaros defies expectations of what a puzzle game should be. Players of these kinds of games are trained to go for 100% completion. But in Blueprints, the credits only roll once, when you first reach room 46. There are tons of puzzles beyond that point, but they're all optional. They're there if you want to pursue them. There is no definite ending beyond room 46. Tonda himself says that this is ultimately a game about people making assumptions and having expectations, and finding out over time that their assumptions are wrong, and then their expectations are surpassed. Due to Blueprints' critical acclaim, these reviewers expected an experience equal to Outer Wilds and Return of the Obra Dinn, and they would have found one if they had stuck around and learned to deal with the game's roguelite design. To truly enjoy Blueprints, you need to approach it on its own terms. After all, it's not just another puzzle game. Don't forget to like this video if you've enjoyed it, and check out this video if you're looking for more great puzzle games or roguelites to play. Thank you very much for watching.